Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Tonight is Sunday night. It is December 30th, 2018. Welcome Smaulgld Game Changers. Tonight we're going to discuss economics. We're going to discuss it in the context of California's plan to save the puppies. Yes, indeed, new law passed. We're going to go through the implications of that law, at least some preliminary thoughts. Want to get some of your ideas on this new law. But first, let's figure out what happened in the market. And we do have news here. I did notice this. Steve Lindbergh, baby, is asking, what happened to Kitco? Well, before I came on, I was checking the gold prices and the silver prices, as you know, each and every night when we do this live stream before we get to the topic of the story. We give a quick overview of the gold and silver prices and the crypto prices. And while checking the gold and silver prices, I saw that gold was down $190. Silver was down 98 cents. Gold was down like 15%. This is just a Kitco error. They're both trading very close to where they traded on Friday, but the market is indeed open. Kitco has some type of flash crash bug in their software. Okay, so where are we with the cryptos? Bitcoin up 2.33% at 38.22. Ethereum at $138. That's up about 4%. Bcash is flat at $160.46. In Litecoin, $31.58. That's up about 2.66%. Now, in other news today, it was fairly slow news today, or at least for me, because I wasn't paying much attention to the news. But I did notice two items in the news, and they have to do with economics. They have to do with how people transact. Let me just show you this gold and silver thing that I did notice earlier today. You can see gold was down $190 on Kitco. Our friend Sean Broderick noticed it and said that Kitco should fix its incorrect gold and silver price before conspiracy tongues start wagging. As of right now, they have not fixed them, but actually they fixed silver. Silver's down 3 cents right now, which is where it should be, and it's at 15.32. They haven't fixed the gold price yet. Everything else seems to be working on Kitco if you use that. The Smaulgld price charts are all, actually they're working, but they're not rendering properly on the sites. I haven't had time to fix them, but when I right-click them, that's the trick. If you go to the Smaulgld site and open it up in a new browser, you will see the correct gold and silver prices. Okay, now let's talk first about some economic trends that we're seeing. Now, the gist of economics is transactions. I mean, if you don't know anything about economics, you can distill it down to someone wants to buy something and someone wants to sell something. And in very basic terms, you deal with supply and demand. You may not know this when you go into a store. You may not think all this through, but that's essentially what's happening. You have your currency, your money, your barter, whatever you're going to use to buy something at a store, and the store is going to sell it to you. And the guts of that transaction is basically there's a price, and you're going to pay it, and they're going to deliver the item to you. Everything else in that transaction is secondary, because the primary reason for most purchases is to conduct the transaction. Well, we've seen just in the last couple of days 2 transactions gone awry. And they didn't have much to do with someone complaining about the price, someone saying, well, this is too expensive, someone saying that I don't like the price, or someone complaining about the quality of the merchandise. No, that's not what we've been having recently. We've been having a problem of a different nature, a problem that is non-transactional, but yet is causing a big, big problem. Now, I can't play the clips for you, but there's 2 transactions that come to mind, and they both deal with buying and selling. Let's deal with the buying one. So a person walks into a shop to make a transaction, and this particular person was very upset about the way they were identified as incidentally. So I'll play a bit of the clip. I'm going to have to cut it off. This is a family-friendly show. I won't be able to show you the other video or play the clip for the other video because the expletives are abundant and I won't be able to bleep them out or even play you a clip. But let me play you a clip here. This is somebody who's going to buy something. They don't have a problem with the price. They don't have a problem with anything other than, well, let's have a listen.
There's a young man in here.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
I can call the police if you'd like me to. You need to settle down.
You need to settle down and mind your business, okay?
Okay, that person's going to start cussing and swearing. Now, what's annoyed this person at the point of sale is not, again, the price or the lack of the good that they wish to buy, but the fact that the clerk behind the counter referred to this person and another person as you guys and got this person very upset. To the point where there was yelling and screaming, and then this person walked towards the end, kicked over a display item, wanted to speak to the manager, and made a big fuss. And that leads me to think, okay, what's the real purpose here? Is it to go in and buy or sell something, or is there something else happen? And this person was complaining that they had been misgendered, meaning that they called him sir, and he wanted to be called ma'am. Now, I like to just weigh in on this and say, if he's claiming to be misgendered, I think that is a misnomer, because he was being referred to as sir, and that is Mr. Gendering, not misgendering. So you can get very ridiculous with this, but this person was quite annoyed, and this is a viral video of a person who believes that he or she has the right to be called by the proper gender. And we had another one today, which I'm not going to play for you. This one was not an issue with the customer, but an issue with the clerk behind the counter. Gentleman walked in, wasn't offensive in any way, shape, or form, other than the fact that he was wearing a Make America Great hat again, and also some type of Trump t-shirt. Well, that triggered the person at the counter. He's now known as, I think, Vape Counter Boy. Started screaming and yelling, racist. He wasn't going to serve him. And again, the economics of the transaction were secondary. Now, what you have to highlight here is the person behind the counter is the customer in the first instance is buying. And in some respects, the customer is always right. Person comes into the store, wants to be called Queen Latifah. In some respects, if you want their money, maybe you got to call them that. But here's a case where someone working at the store, not the owner of the store, so it's not even an economic decision, just decides that this person has offended him and he is a Trump racist and he's not going to serve him. And he throws an even bigger fit than the person who wanted to be called ma'am, screeching. I can't play it for you because, as I mentioned, it is complete with many loud expletives, which I will not play for you. But we're seeing this trend here where people's day-to-day transactions are being interfered with by one or both parties, where they can't seem to make a simple transaction without having a bit of a meltdown over what really is not a confrontational it's not a confrontational interaction to buy or sell something generally. You may get involved in negotiations sometimes. You don't want to pay. You've got a problem with the product. But here it is not that. The issue is not, if you look at the transactions in both of these instances, and I'll leave them in the show notes, one guy wants to buy vape juice. There's nothing at dispute there. He's willing to pay the price to have the item in stock, but yet somehow that transaction isn't going to happen. And the same with the transgender issue was it just could not complete the transaction unless she was called ma'am. We're seeing a lot of this. I don't know how long, but this could actually slow down the GDP of the country if people can't make transactions when they normally can. Okay, let's move on now to tonight's top story. This is a very interesting story. It's very typical of California. Now, a while back, we covered a story. Let's get our pooch back up there, and then we're going to get into the statute. A while back, we covered a story in California, San Francisco. Kamala Harris put forth a bill And she was worried that people were paying too much in rent, and that is indeed an issue in California. Rents are too high for a variety of reasons that we won't get into. But her solution was, if you made $100,000 or $125,000 or less, and you paid X percentage of your income in rent, you'd be entitled to get some type of tax credit relief at the end of the year. Now, of course, that one's pretty simple to realize that that's pretty moronic, because all you're doing there is subsidizing the landlords, because if somebody can't pay their rent or has difficulty paying the rent, they know that they'll be able to pay their rent through the subsidy. And also it means that if people are looking for apartments and they know they're going to get a subsidy, they're going to look a little higher. And that doesn't mean they're going to look at more higher quality places. It just means the landlord will see them coming and will just raise the price of the rent on their places. And then the landlords that have places that are slightly less expensive, they'll just push their rents up higher. And all it does is ensure that rents go higher and that the government pays for it. And that's essentially a wealth transfer, or it's a wealth transfer from the government to the landlords, which means from taxpayers to landlords, and it doesn't solve the problem at all. But that doesn't stop California from trying. That was a Kamala Harris bill, but that bill had no chance of passing. This particular bill did indeed pass, and at first glance you'd say, well, this is a good thing. See, when people aren't thinking, or they just hear something sounds good, they may go for it. Well, California legislature went ahead and went for it. And here's what they went for. There's a bill now, and the idea, before I read you the bill, is there's an issue. No one can deny there's an issue, that there is an abundance of dogs and cats, especially dogs, probably even more so, that get abandoned. They end up in rescue shelters, and they become a burden, and many times the dogs, they can't find homes for them. And if they're in a shelter that will only keep them for a period of time, they may end up being put down, or they hopefully find them homes. And part of the root of the problem, they think, are puppy mills, where they're not necessarily the best run. They're run just to churn out as many animals as they can. Many people take them on. They may either not have the wherewithal or understanding to take care of a dog, or they may be abusive to the dog. For whatever reason, that dog will no longer have a home at the person who got the dog at a puppy mill. And they seem to be a higher incidence of dog abandonment and abuse of animals that are coming from what they call puppy mills. So the solution is, rather than cracking down on the puppy mills, shutting them down, inspecting them, regulating them, whatever, they decide that the purpose of this bill will be to restrict what pet stores can sell, pet store operators. And the genius here is that pet store operators can only sell animals that they receive from a shelter. Now, I've got a number of thoughts on this. I haven't thought it all the way through, but it sounds like they probably haven't either, because the bill is pretty short. And I want to see what you guys have to say, because this seems on its face, without thinking much about it, as being a good thing. Because anything that will, save the children, save the puppies, wonderful. But I'm not so sure that this is going to do the trick. And I have a number of questions. And I want to see what you think. And if you have other questions, I don't think this will do the trick. As I mentioned, when you're generally against something, you either make it illegal, or you regulate it, or you somehow try to live with it. And that's what I would imagine in this case would be the puppy mills. But what this bill does, it says that stores that sell animals can't sell them unless they've come from a shelter. Now, here's some of the, let's look at the statute here. This is passed. This is going into effect on January 1. And it says that existing law requires pet store operators to comply with the governing laws of the care of animal and pet stores. Okay. And if an existing law makes a pet store operator who violates these provisions guilty of a misdemeanor under certain conditions. Existing law also regulates the retail sales of dogs and cats. Fair enough. Existing law requires an animal control officer, a humane officer, or a peace officer who detects any of certain violations of the law governing pet store operators to issue a single notice to correct the violation. So they already have regulations in the field. People looking at making sure that the people who sell these animals have them, they're being properly cared for. And then it says if an existing law makes a pet store operator, the existing law makes a pet store operator who fails to comply with a notice to correct, and therefore they're guilty of a crime. Now they want to add another crime to all this concept of regulating the pet store owners. Again, they're not going after the puppy mills. They're going after the sellers of the animals. And this says now, the bill would prohibit on or after January 1st a pet store owner from selling a live dog or cat or rabbit in a pet store unless the dog or cat or rabbit, I don't know why rabbits are in there, was obtained from a public animal control agency or shelter, Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animal Shelter, Humane Society Shelter, or rescue group as defined in some legal language that they have. So a store, a pet store, can only sell I don't know why they would sell anything but a live dog or cat or rabbit unless the dog, cat, or rabbit was obtained from one of those agencies. And those will either be the nonprofits or the government shelters. Which means you couldn't buy a pet from a breeder. The bill will require all sales of dogs and cats authorized by this provision to be in compliance with the laws and requiring the spaying and neutering of animals as specified. So there's work involved. It's not like when you get a rescue dog, you get it for free. They still have to make sure that the animal meets all the requirements, spaying and neutering and so on, has the shots, rabies bills. So it's not a free animal. You don't get a free. A lot of people just think, oh, I'll just go down and get a rescue animal. No one wants it, and I'll just get a free animal. No, there's an expense for the shelter in order to not just keep all the dogs and other pets healthy and within the regulations for care and shots and so on, but then they have to have space, they have to feed them. There's a significant cost involved in shelter. So keep that in mind as we go through this, that the shelters, while they're nonprofit, it's not just like, well, you just take the dog in and you feed them scraps and it doesn't cost you anything. Then it says the bill will require each pet store to maintain records sufficient to document the source. So they have to make sure that they're getting these dogs, cats, and rabbits from a shelter, and they've got to keep a lot of records on all that. All right. Now the next part of this is where it gets a little tricky here. This is part 2. So here's the law itself. It says, we're going to skip the first part about the code. Section 2, a pet store operator shall not sell a live dog, cat, or rabbit unless the dog, cat, or rabbit was obtained from a public animal control or shelter, and the whole list of where you can get them from. And the sales of dogs and cats authorized by the section shall be in compliance with a bunch of legal language. And then it's basically a repeat. They gave the rationale for the law, saying what the law is going to be, and they give you the law. But here, then it says they got to keep the records. Then it says if the pet store operator violates this, they're going to get a civil penalty of $500. $500 penalty per animal that is sold, offered for sale in violation of this section. So someone brings some 4 or 5 puppies to the store, and they even want to give them to the store. They don't live near a shelter. They live near the store, and the store cannot take them on. The store cannot take care of them, can't give them, even if they have all their shots and they're spayed or neutered, whatever. The store cannot take those, cannot find them homes, and from an economic point of view, can't make the profit. Because if a store is able to sell animals and they're in good shape and nobody wants them, well, they're doing a clear service as a middleman because they have a storefront. They pay rent and they can find those 4 pups homes, and they can make a little money off of it too. It's a good thing, but that's not going to work. This is going to drive those 4 puppies into a shelter. Now, you say, well, what's the big deal? Well, if somebody's willing just to drive into a pet store and say, like, I don't want these puppies anymore, they might not have that much interest in doing much more than that. Maybe they won't drive to the shelter. Maybe they'll just say, oh, I don't know about this law. I don't know about any shelters. Oh, that shelter's 20 miles away. You know what? And they just leave the dogs there. And that happens. You know, you think no one does that. But that's why there's shelters, because people do that all the time. So I don't think they've thought this through very much. I think, you know, going after the pet store owners and saying you can only take on rescue dogs, they're assuming that the system is going to work properly. And then they say that if you violate this, it's actually a crime, and but it's a misdemeanor. Now, here's some questions on this. As I mentioned, the first flaw, I think, in it is that it goes after the pet store selling the pets rather than a crackdown on the puppy mills, the fines going there. But let's assume that this actually could work. Which, at first glance, I don't think it will. Because first of all, how many pets are sold through the pet stores? And what percentage of all pets are sold currently through pet stores versus via breeders and puppy mills and so on? I think that's very important. Now, what if the pet stores sell fewer dogs as a result of this, or decide not to sell dogs at all, or cats? Why would they sell fewer dogs? Well, some people don't want rescue dogs for good reasons. Some people may want a specific breed, and maybe certain dogs, probably for sure, I don't know, are abandoned more than others. I would imagine that some people will get a dog and it's not good for children. They don't know that, and they have to get rid of it, and they don't do the right thing, and it ends up in a shelter. And there may be a lot of those dogs in the shelters, ones that aren't good with kids. They all end up at the pet store, and people come into the pet store and they want a dog that's good for kids, and so I'm not taking that one. So now what happens when the pet store's got a lot of dogs it can't sell because it can't match its customers' desires with... Here's our dog going nuts. You can't match your customers' desires to the marketplace. You have to take what the rescue is sending you, and that may not be what people want. And almost by definition, and it sounds cruel, but I would think that there is, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would imagine in the market for abandoned dogs, certain breeds of dogs are more likely to be abandoned than others. And that would mean that those dogs would be the ones that get sold when they're the ones that are harder to sell. Okay, so that might mean that fewer dogs find a home. Even though, because if the puppy mills are still out there, and they're not cracking down on them, well, then those dogs are going to be bred, and they may be abandoned, and they may end up in a shelter. Then they may end up at the pet store, but the pet store at some point may say, I'm not taking any more of these dogs. Now, what are they going to do? Make the pet store sell these dogs? No, what's going to happen is the shelters will overfill with maybe certain breeds of dogs, and that may mean that more dogs get put down. So this isn't helping really at all. I don't think it's possible under that scenario. People may buy dogs from out of state. The other thing that may happen is some people may want a specific breed of dog. Well, if you can't, and there are many breeds of dogs, and that is one of the wonderful things about dogs is the diversity of the different types of breeds, and some of them are underbred, either because they're too expensive or not many people want them. And that's the same thing that'll happen is those dogs won't be bred. They would be dogs that probably may never be abandoned, but because of this law that you have to sell them through a pet store, it may not be worth the while to carry 76 breeds of dog. You're going to carry the top 5, and then the other types of dogs won't be bred, and then they just will be gone from California unless they're brought in from out of state. Some people, as I mentioned, may not even trust rescue dogs. And there's a valid reason for that. Some dogs, if they've been abused, may have certain tics or traits that the shelter may not be aware of, the owner may not be aware of, the store may not be aware of, as part of their abuse. And the owner may find out later that the dog doesn't like a certain motion, and that may set the dog off. And who knows? Now, that doesn't mean that all rescue dogs are a risk, but it does mean that some people may not want them for that reason, or, as I mentioned, may not even want the breeds that they have available. And some people like to have a lot of rescue dogs are older, or they can range from any age, and some people may wish only to have a puppy, or only to have a certain age dog, and that may not be available. So you're going to get a misallocation in the dog market, which may not be good for dogs or their owners. I'm not sure. And now there's one other thing I want to raise, and I want to see what your comments are. I'm not looking at them. I don't see them right now. Notice the dependence on the shelter. The shelter has to be either the state-run or one of the 5013C, one of the charitable organizations. Now, people think, oh, well, it's charitable and it's state. They've got the best intentions. Well, maybe not. There's two issues with this. Charitable organizations, a lot of people think, well, everybody there is working for nothing because they just like dogs. And they just work there for the love of it and they don't make any money. A lot of people that work at charitable organizations pull down a decent salary. Part of that salary is based on how large they are. How many dogs they can handle means that their budget has to be a certain size, and if their budget's a certain size, then to get a person who knows how to run a business of a certain size, you got to pay them a certain salary. Well, it's possible if this, I'm not saying it's the case, but it's possible that this, let's get rid of this law. If you're listening to me and looking at that, let's look at our cute rescue dog here. It's possible that shelters may shrink in size. It's possible the other thing can happen. You can have an explosion in rescue dogs, and I'll get into how that might happen. But let's say that this law is effective and you have less dogs requiring shelters. Well, that means you're going to have a concentration of shelters because the larger shelters are the ones that are going to survive. The smaller ones won't be able to, which means that the smaller ones will close down. And that means that there'll be fewer and far between, because why open up a rescue shelter when there used to be 100 dogs a year in your 10-mile, 15-mile radius that requires aid, and now there's only 3? Well, you're out of there, and then the dogs are going to have to go somewhere 50 miles away, which means they probably won't get there. So now you have a bigger problem. Now, also, when you have these mega centers scattered across the state, well, you're going to have the issue of abuse potentially, because now they're monopolies. They don't have competition. And the other thing that they might do, which would be unethical, but just because you work at a nonprofit, Clinton Foundation, doesn't mean that you are ethical. Your business is going to be dependent on how many dogs you bring in. Now, that could lead people to do things that you can't imagine to get the dogs into the shelter. I know when they have like the gun amnesties, you turn in your guns and you get money. People go out and steal guns to get the money to turn them in. People steal dogs all the time. That's why you have a lot of them. People get their dog chipped so they can't steal. So you do have an potential. The more you concentrate the power in these dog shelters, that they may do unethical things. They're also going to be getting state favors because they're the preferred place for the shelters. There could be deals between the shelters and the large pet stores. So you really are changing the entire dynamic of the dog market, if you can call it that. Now, the opposite thing could happen is that you could have more dogs. Because the same reason, the shelters may decide that now that they've got this built-in business, and again, remember, it is a business. It's not free. In order to get the dogs up to snuff to send them to the pet store, they've got to spay them, neuter them. Think of all the contracts with the vets. I mean, people don't think about this, but there's a lot of... I mean, this happens in the healthcare industry for humans. I'm sure it happens with dogs. You get preferred veterinarians. You get to get the contract to deal with these dogs, to give them their shots, to give them their rabies. Oh, and they probably need a little extra of this and a little extra of that, and then the state's paying for it, or it's part of the charity. So let's just give them that shot too. Maybe they don't need it, and they get the bill. So you can see there could be a lot of corruption in this. And of course, politicians never think of corruption potential as a problem. They think it is something that potentially might benefit them. So I think that this, and I haven't even thought this through. I'm just throwing out stuff here. I want to see what you guys think, but I think that this is attacking a problem that needs to be attacked, but attacking it entirely in the wrong way. And I'm not surprised given that it's coming out of California, but let's see what you guys say. Before that, there's also, just for the record, the American Kennel Club and the California Retailers Association are against this. Now, I can understand why the California Retailers Association would be against this. That would be like saying they can only sell beer if it came from this place, or only sell bread if it came from here. It's restricting their ability to conduct commerce based on their clientele's need. You can only sell dogs if they come from a rescue. And then the Pet Industry Joint Advisory Kennel said AB 485 blocks all of California's pet lovers from having access to professional license and ethical commercial breeders, which is true. As I mentioned, that there may be breeders that deal in what you might consider a niche dog that not everyone likes or can afford, or whatever the reason. It's just not a popular breed. Could be a great dog, and the market wants it, but not from a big box pet store after it's been in a rescue center. And so that would probably harm the market. And again, you're homogenizing. Probably what's going to happen is you're homogenizing what dogs end up in the shelters, and they may be the least desirable types of dogs. And then you may end up having another problem. That what happens when somebody gets a rescue pet from a pet store, for whatever reason, decides they're going to ditch the dog, it ends up back at the... Now, I just thought of something there. I mean, unscrupulous people can go and get the dogs and then return them, and they can just circle them. That would be horrible for the dogs, too. All right, let's see what you guys think about this situation with our dogs. All right, let's see. Prashanti Girl is here. What happened to Kitco? We discussed that. There was an issue with the with the pricing of the gold and silver. Let's see if they fix that while I got you on the phone here. Got you on the blower. No, yeah. Gold is now at $12.78, down $1.80, and silver at $15.31, down 4 cents. So really no change in the gold or silver markets. Sometimes I'm on the phone, the cryptos shoot up or down, but they're pretty much steady since I last read you the quotes. Okay. De La Ville, the vape shop in Georgia. Yeah, the guy went crazy. He had Trump gear on. Yeah, he really did. He absolutely lost it. And again, his job is to... I mean, if he does something, it's one thing to have principles. I understand that. But just your mere existence, and the guy lost it. Yes, a clerk got fired. Yes, the vape shop put out a tweet earlier today saying that that's not right. A guy comes in to buy something, and he gets screamed at. Not surprised. TDS, which is Trump derangement syndrome. I like to say some people have silver derangement syndrome or gold derangement syndrome. I got a lot of comments from last night's discussion on the price of silver. One guy was saying, I'm not sure if this guy's not just a meme to be against silver. I think people were surprised that I thought silver would rise next year. Remember, I'm not against gold or silver. I'm against these pumping narratives. And a lot of people think they're one and of the same thing, that if you're for gold or silver, you have to believe the BS stories that these people concoct to get you interested in buying gold or silver or subscribing to their newsletters. That's what I'm against. I'm not against gold and silver. Vape shop meltdown was funny. AF says Dano. Yep. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Gerrymandering the misgenders. Ann Holloman says all this gender stuff is blown out of proportion. Well, you know, if you just take the common sense view to treat people how they want to be treated, then you would respect their view. But when someone demands of you, then they're not respecting you. You know, I walk in and I say, I want to be called the King of Siam. And I start screaming at you if you don't call me that. That's not right either. But if I ask you, I said, look, I think I'm the King of Siam, and so I'm going to buy some cigarettes, which I neither am the King of Siam nor do I smoke cigarettes, then the transaction will go on. If I start screaming, I am the King of Siam, I am, and start citing chapter and verse of Dr. Seuss, that's not respectful either. All right. Roger Henley. Yeah, I don't want to get into it. I mean, I'm not even interested in that issue, discussing genders. It's to me, it's more of an economic issue that people have lost their minds, that the transaction is not important anymore. It's everything around it. It's just like what you see with Patreon. I mean, they're there to act as a middleman and take your money and for you on your behalf, and then take their cut and send it to you. They're not there to tell you how you should conduct. It's like guy comes over to mow your lawn and he says, well, if I hear anything I don't like, I'm going to just turn the lawnmower off. You say, well, then you're not going to cut my lawn. But that's where we've gone now. Where I think it's a function of people not realizing where their bread is buttered or how the economic system works. They think that there's no economic consequences. You could just do whatever you want because those things are more important than how you feel. And I don't know. I think it's a disturbing trend. Roger Henley, pet stores will just close down and nobody can buy pets. Well, yeah, I mean, that's my thought, is because if you're a pet shop owner, you kind of know what dogs people buy and what dogs people want. And now you're going to be like, well, whatever the shelter sends us this week. If you have a certain dog you have in mind, now not everybody does. Some people just go and fall in love with a dog, see a dog, and they say, oh, that's a nice dog. It's a rescue dog. It needs a home. Boom, take it home. Other people say, you know, I have to have my golden retriever. So you go into the store and the guy says, no golden retrievers this week. And you say, when do you expect them in? I don't know. When somebody dumps one off at the rescue shelter, we'll let you know. I mean, that is going to destroy the pet sales, because a lot of people are probably the most, not important dog, one of the most widely purchased dogs, I'd imagine, are golden retrievers. And I don't know how often people abandon golden retrievers. Maybe less than other dogs. I'm sure people abandon pit bulls a lot when they realize, maybe I don't want a pit bull, or who knows which dogs get abandoned. Doesn't matter what my generalized thoughts are on it. There are going to be some dogs that people want to buy and are not going to be available. And there's going to be other dogs very few people want, and they're going to be in the shelters, and there's going to be no, quote, buyers for them. And there's going to be more of them than if there were, you know, a freer market. And that's not fair to those dogs. I mean, it's not their fault that people like the golden retriever better than them. All right, let's see. And KZ Gitzer says that bill's going to fail. Steve Lindbergh, baby, says telling business what they can or can't do. That's exactly why the California Retailers Association is against this. This has nothing to do with, in some respects, nothing to do with dogs. It's the state saying what you can sell, because they're trying to solve a problem that they're not able to. They're not able to solve the problem of the puppy mills and the issues that they're causing, so they have to go after the pet store. That's not their issue. The pet store, so it's fine to say the pet store has to make sure that they are selling animals and they know where they get them from, so they're not violating rules of getting rare dogs from Nicaragua or something. But the fact that they're not allowed to sell perfectly fine and animals that they're cared for and they're spayed and neutered and whatever regulations they have, that they're not allowed to sell them unless they come from a shelter. I don't know. All right. Prashanti goes, what about treating cattle, chickens, pigs, and fish humanely? Seems farmed animals' lives don't matter. Well, that is true. A lot of veterinarians, they don't treat, if you have a pet chicken or something like that, they only treat dogs and cats. Yeah, there is a hierarchy, that's for sure. pets. They're not all treated equally. And that law specifically only applies to dogs, cats, and rabbits. So they can sell guinea pigs. They can sell other animals, I would imagine, but these have to come from a shelter. And I guess it's because more of these animals end up in shelters, and they're probably more popular as pets, and therefore abandoned in greater numbers than other pets. Although you hear people putting, I don't know what they buy. They buy snakes and little caimans or whatever, like little mini alligators, and they let them loose into the wild too. All right. De La Villa. Fortunately, there are animals in shelters that have problems, both health and emotional. Yes, that is the issue. And I think an emotional problem a dog may have, you may not know about it. You may seem delighted to be with you, and then all of a sudden something triggers in him that you do that you're like, I'm not doing anything. And he thinks you're going to do something. You know, I've heard of stories. I haven't seen it, but I can imagine a dog could get triggered from abuse, and especially one, you know, where the triggering event, it could be something that isn't overtly threatening. He just associates that with something being threatening. I just got my dog on the way to the shelter. Oh, interesting. Ann Holloman. I ended up with 5 cats because one gave birth to my garage. They're here and they seem happy. Yeah, and again, you know, that's the free market. If people want to take care of stray animals, then they take care of stray animals. But if they're restricted in what they can and cannot do, there's some people who are fully devoted to animals, or some people care less about animals. But the market should pick that up so that it's not as big of a problem. But if you make it difficult for people to bring their pet to a shelter, then maybe they won't bring it to a shelter. Who goes to a box store to buy a pet? Well, that's a good point. But now, KZ Gixer, now they have to. This is what the law appears to be saying. You have to buy your pet from a. Now maybe I have to read the rule again, but it sounds like you have to buy a pet from a store that is getting the inventory from rescue, because they're trying to crack down on you buying them from puppy mills. And remember, the puppy mill name has a very bad name, but there are also breeders that are, you know, they're throwing them all into the same basket, that are ethical and do things humanely and correctly. And it sounds like, according to the complaint and that other thing I read to you from the kennel company, that they're not allowed to sell direct anymore. So what happens when the dog doesn't sell, De La Villa? That's exactly right. What happens when, or what happens when the pet store says, I can't take any more, I don't know, name a dog. I can't take any more fox terriers. I'm not picking on them, but I'm just saying, because that's all they have and they can't sell them. What happens to them? They go back to the shelter. Then what happens to them? Yep. Release the unwanted dogs. Mint Mark SI. Come on, government always makes better decisions than you can. Well, that's definitely true. De La Ville. Yes. My dog, Buddy, was a rescue. We got lucky. He was wonderful. Yes, and you got your dog under a circumstance where there was a rescue center, and you didn't have to go there to get your dog. You went there, and you found a delightful dog. In fact, let us show you Buddy, because Buddy is cool. And Buddy is one of the stars of the Mug Club. We'll show you his mug shot. I don't think Pablo's here with Lucky. We're not going to show Lucky tonight. Here's Buddy right here. Well, here's Buddy. Well, let me show you Buddy with the Smaulgld Classic mug. There you go. There he is. 10-year-old Buggy. All right. Let's see. Those pet store cages are horrible. Yes, and that's what they're advocating for. Get them out of the shelter and into the pet store cages. There you go. Yeah, I mean, there's cage training when the puppy is when the dog is a puppy, but in a cage is life. That's very strange. All right, let's see. Oh, there was a lot more comments here. No, there's not. I'm okay here. DW, did someone hack into Kitco and change the data? Nah, they fixed it. Everything is fine. I'll just check it again. Gold is down $1.90 and silver's down a nickel. No, nothing happened, and it just what do you call it? Horse. Okay. Z-Spec, face it. What happens in other countries is not good for dogs. Steve Lindbergh, baby, says man's best friends don't deserve Kelly government. And Andrew's commenting on the vape shop guy. I mean, that was ridiculous. And so she doesn't like the pumping narrative either. You're talking about, I mean, I like gold, silver, dogs. I mean, I just not, well, dogs have nothing to do with this. But gold and silver, I'm not into the pumping narrative. I don't know if there's a dog pumping channel. But generally people are pretty fair about dogs, at least from what I've seen. They show dogs in their natural habitat, like Buddy here. All right. Okay. Steve Lindbergh, we used to be a constitutional republic, now we are a third world country. Not in wealth, but yes, but in governance, it's just outcome-based governance. It's just, oh, well, don't worry about the constitutionality of it. This is what we want, so let's just do it. The data set, Qualcomm Stadium. China rolls out a motherload of gold and it's game over. There you go. Get gold while you can. Andrew, you'll get the black market dogs being dumped off at a time for money so people can get the dogs they want. Absolutely. That's another, you're absolutely right. That's another one that you'll have. Very good point. I said people buy dogs from out of state. But yes, that'll be a black market. And that'll also raise the price of dogs for people who want a specific breed. And I would imagine if you have a dog that you're not supposed to have, would be contraband. And I wonder what happens to that dog if they find out you have it. It's not like, well, you pay the fine, you get to keep it. No, I'm sure they come and the dog protective services come and take that dog from you. I mean, the whole thing, I'm not sure they thought this out. And of course, they didn't think it through. They're stacking. I was the guy who said Smaulgld is a meme. I feel that way because every video I've seen is essentially making fun of Chris Duane or just saying China's going to end the dollar. Well, those are two different things. In fact, I think what Chris Duane does is very good. He sells not so much silver. I know he says he sells silver, but he sells a limited artwork piece. That's what gives those things value. Because the price of the silver, what he sells, goes down every year. Has gone down. It's the fact that he sells them in limited edition. He has special artwork on them. What I make fun of is this idea. And I have to make fun of it because you can't say it with a straight face for 7 years. China is going to crush the dollar and silver shortage and silver is so useful and that the whole world is messed up because it doesn't see it. No, I don't think so. The world isn't so messed up that it can't see value. Silver is cheap for a reason. I'm not against it. It's always been cheap. It's never been the most expensive metal on earth. It's never been revered to the level of gold. But yet they insist silver is rarer than gold and silver is going to be 16 to 1. Historically, it never has been, other than when it was set at that price. And it hasn't been there for over 100 years. It's just cherry-picked data. And it's cherry-picked because if you're selling silver or you're selling the concept that China is going to crush the dollar and it's gold 50,000, all these predictions, all wrong. So that is what I'm against because at some point you continue to say the same thing. And the same thing, it's okay to keep repeating something if it's true, but repeating something of a prediction that's incorrect. I mean, greatest wealth transfer in the next 10 years is going to happen. It said in 2010, happens this decade, guaranteed. You know, silver was $17 when those statements were made. It's $14. Oh, okay. I think the problem is that people believe something just because they hear it and they don't look at the reality and say, well, why isn't silver? Oh, manipulation. They're not wrong. They're just early. Well, that deserves, I think, to be mocked because it's incorrect and they're insisting that what they say is correct when objectively it's incorrect. And yet they say it with a straight face, they repeat it with a straight face, and they get their followers to insist that something that is incorrect is still correct. And that's the problem I have, and that is no different than the sheeple, as they would say, that follow mainstream media narratives. People love to follow a narrative. Once they hook on to the narrative, they believe the narrative. They want to hear the narrative. They want to hear 20 other channels repeat it. And then they also want to believe that somehow they've got some inside information that the rest of the world somehow doesn't get, but they got it. They're woke. You know, they're not like the sheeple, when in fact they are. And they're in an echo chamber of monumental proportions, repeat the same nonsense over and over again. And that's why I get silver is rarer than gold. The gold-silver ratio is unsustainable. No, it's not. The gold-silver ratio has been sustained. It's been sustained for over 100, somewhat longer than anyone here has been alive. And yet they hear these stories. They're out there. Silver shortage. JP Morgan's got 800 million ounces of silver. And you can't prove it's not true, even though they can't prove it is true. Yeah, so that's what I'm against. And again, if you want to believe narratives, that's fine. And you want to listen to the same nonsense, you can listen to it on all their channels. If you want to listen to my nonsense, you tune in here and you listen to what I say. It's just that what I say is different than what all the other silver pumper channels say. But thanks, Stacking Assets. I understand what happens is when people hear the same thing, they think somebody's an expert, they hear other people say it, they interview each other, they all say the same thing. They're all involved in hopium, and they all hope something is going to change. But yet, they don't present it as hope. They present it as somehow it's a fact. And that the world, once the world figures out that they're the smart ones, then they will rush into the metals, and the metals will skyrocket, and you'll be able to own 20 city blocks just from having a silver eagle or a few silver dimes. I don't believe it. I don't think Buddy believes it either. Look at him. What he believes in is a good, solid, Smaulgld mug. Yes, indeed. The classic Smaulgld mug. Mugs are real wealth. Measure your wealth in mugs. All right. All fiat currencies can fall. Gold and silver rise. It doesn't have... Yeah, you're right, Stacking Assets. It doesn't have China and the dollar. That's just one of the narratives. Some of these people are so blinded by wanting gold to rise, they think that China is their gold buddy because they buy gold, and therefore they have to praise China because China is going to crush the dollar. The silver people, they don't say that. They're not big on China because China's for gold. They're for silver. They somehow think that silver and gold are two separate items, that silver is rarer than gold, so they don't go for that Chinese story. The gold bugs love the China story. They think that, and they want to believe that everyone in China wakes up woke. They're smart. They read Sun Tzu, and they get up in the morning, they look around, they say, oh, what was I thinking? I got to go to the gold store and buy gold because I'm smart, because China's going to crush the dollar. It's just fantasy. It's nonsense. But they are smart because they like gold. Stacking Asset, I just think you're memeing by repeating the same stuff, being obsessed with Chris Strain. No, I'm not obsessed with Chris Strain. You want a friend in New York? You get a dog, says Steve Lindbergh, baby. New Yorkers aren't friendly? Sure they are. Here we go. The dollar is clearly going to be confetti. Yes. Oh, I agree, as will the yuan. So why wouldn't gold and silver rise dramatically? See, this is the thing. Once you believe something and you think it's a fact, then you can't see why, and you ask rhetorical questions like, well, then people are going to use gold and silver. Not necessarily. You see, this is an example I use all the time. If there's a lot of car crashes in the 20s and 30s, some people would look at that and say, you know, if these car crashes, these big pileups keep happening, why wouldn't people just return to the horse and buggy? We never had this problem before. Horses have been transportation for 5,000 years. People always return to horses when something else doesn't work because horses are reliable forms of transportation. You have it in your mind that somehow gold and silver have to be what people will resort to. In other words, that's the assumption you start with. That when all fails, it's gold and silver. Well, maybe it isn't anymore. That's impossible. Who repealed that law of economics? It's not a law of economics. if people don't have the direct relationship or tactile relationship with gold or silver as a medium of exchange, and the only people that have that are people over 60 years old, then why would you return to gold and silver? Oh, they'd have to. Have to says who? Who makes them? If your experience as an economist, as a banker, as a person who buys stuff in a store has never been to use gold or silver, why do you have to return to gold and silver when you were never there? And I think that's the biggest mistake that the gold and silver pumpers make, is that why wouldn't it return to gold and silver? You know, they show charts of the money supply and how it's much bigger than the gold supply. Well, maybe because gold isn't considered as much a part of the monetary system as it was in the 1880s and the 1940s and the 1970s, and that the remnants of it are still there, but they're not there to the same level. And that's why you've got that big divergence. Silver has been totally demonetized. People don't even use it as a medium of exchange for pocket change. So the reason I mock this is because people have it stuck in their craws that we're dealing with facts, that gold and silver are money, period. And they don't want to hear anything else about that. And if you say that maybe they're not, that maybe they're dormant money, which is one of the things I say all the time, that they're not necessarily used, and they are not used as currency. And silver is not even used as a store of value because it has been ineffective as a store of value, whereas gold has at least been a store of value. Silver spikes and dives almost as much as Bitcoin. That they somehow assume that gold and silver are money, period, and you start with that assumption and you work your way back. And then you just work your way forward to a higher gold or silver price. And you can have decades of that not happening, and you're like, yeah, well, that's just because it hasn't happened yet, man. That's just like your opinion, man. Dude. All right. Let's see. What else we got? Bogus Fiat is here. Hello, Bogus Fiat. So hard when you lose your beloved pet. Yeah, that is the shame, that the dogs, they do not live they don't live coterminously with your life. They die before, generally. All right. Our dog is so attached to my hubby, says De La Ville. All right. My cats are free to do anything they want. 2 times a day in England. You guys are talking about your pets. All right. Well, I'll let you guys talk about your pets. That's very nice there. Send me more with or without the Smaulgld mugs and the Smaulgld shot glasses and Smaulgld glasses. I will post them, but I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight. And I do appreciate, I like when people like Stacking Assets come on, and they're generally angry at the idea that I'm not pumping gold and silver. I'm never trashing gold and silver. I'm not saying that gold and silver are not valuable, just as I'm not saying horses are not valuable, but horses are not valuable primarily for transportation today. They're for betting on and running around in circles, or they make nice pets, or you like to ride as a hobby, but they are not transportation. And gold and silver are not money because they do not fulfill an active currency medium of exchange function. They could, but they don't. And the reason they don't is because they have been superseded, just like the horse has been superseded by the automobile, by digital. I don't even mean cryptocurrencies. The fact that you can wire money, whatever you want to call money, wire dollars, digital bits in your bank account, write checks, that's more effective than lugging around gold and silver. That's why gold and silver are not a current medium of exchange. Oh, but when the lights go out, yeah, okay, when the lights go out, that's fine. And when the gas runs out, you'd be happy you have a horse, you can go somewhere. But that's not the world you live in every day. That's insurance value. The value every day in your life is having cash, digital or otherwise, or even Bitcoin that you can send somewhere very quickly, or Litecoin or whatever. It's not having, you're not going to transact in gold or silver. Now, you may hold on to it as a store of value, insurance if those don't work. But that means part of their value is dormant. That's a very key point. A lot of people trash the dollar, and so it's worth something right now. And right now is all you really have. The future you may have. But the dollar you can spend right now, quick, fast, and in a hurry. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We will see you tomorrow night. I always appreciate the banter. So we will see you tomorrow night. Oh, by the way, people mentioned, just so you know, if you make a comment before the video, before the live stream comes on, or after I shut off the streaming, your comment will not be reproduced. It's not me, it's Google. It will not be reproduced when Google or YouTube uploads the video. I had that comment, and it's interesting because sometimes I have a pre call, and people are making comments, and they think maybe I deleted those comments, or something I say or we comment on after I stop talking. It doesn't get picked up by Google. So I'm not deleting comments. It's just the YouTube only picks up what's being recorded in the chats. All right, good night. And you know what? Tomorrow will probably be New Year's Eve. Probably not a big audience. I'm not a big New Year's Eve person, but probably won't do one. I'll put up a questionnaire, a poll. If people want one, maybe we can go through. I'm gonna do the 2018 gold and silver prices in about 20 different currencies, but I wasn't planning on doing that tomorrow night. I was probably gonna do that New Year's Eve day night, but if I get enough interest, maybe I'll get that out of the way first. All right, thank you very much, and have a good night.